Moving on, we're almost finished with this module. Let's turn to the import side of things. We're on the buy side. We're acquiring goods and bringing them into the United States. The essence of importing, that customs clearance process. How do we get goods into the country? How do we, to use the technical term, enter goods into the commerce of the United States? That is through classification and valuation, all of which is done electronically and can, you don't have to as an importer, but can be done through a customs broker. The CHB component that we've talked about previously, custom house brokerage. So what is C&V, as it's referred to? Well, classification, what are we importing, and how do we match that prose-based description with the corresponding HTS US number, that 10-digit number? Classifying the goods. Because when we prepare the entry electronically to be sent to CBP, we're going to use that number in the fields that describe the product. We're not going to type in the product description. We're going to use the HS number. And the algorithms in the software make that link. Valuation. As the name would indicate, how much are the goods worth? What is the currency of purchase? And the dollar equivalent exchange rate when entry is made? And what was the price that we paid or will be paying in the future should we have credit terms with our vendor overseas? So what's your currency? What's the exchange rate on the date of entry? And how much did we pay? Obviously, that becomes very important because customs duties are based on the value of the goods. 5% duty on a $100, obviously a simple example import, the duties are $5 based on the value of the goods. Valuation, and we made reference to this already, is pursuant to the rules found in the U.S. Customs Regulations and Rulings, CFR, Title 19. Everything you want to know about importing, Title 19 of the Code of Federal Regulations. Tying in some of our earlier themes, the quality of the classification and valuation process, we're on our last bullet point here, depends to a great extent on the content of the commercial invoice, the packing list, and the ocean or air bill of lading, or truck bill for goods coming out of Mexico or Canada, or rail for that matter. So there are those three documents again. Complete, consistent, and correct. I can assure you unequivocally that in the United States that customs decisions about whether to inspect merchandise, stop a shipment in customs, do an intensive exam of 10 containers, it all starts with the quality of the documentation, because when the customs broker starts preparing the entry and populating the fields in the electronic customs clearance format, it's all coming off of these documents. So if they're not complete, consistent, and correct, you can rest assured that you're going to have delays in customs, and things like your lead time offsetting and delivery commitments to our customers, or raw materials that we're importing to go into a production process, that whole thing gets blown up. Lots and lots of disruption in supply chains, not only in the U.S. but abroad, are found in the customs clearance process because of these unexpected delays where we based our cumulative lead time or lead time offsetting on an estimate of a one-day customs clearance, and it takes 10 days. That's not good. It all starts with the quality of the documentation. Classification, governed by the HTS US. That's a big giant book, represents over 5,000 different products that can be imported into the US. So we're going to classify based off of product descriptions in the commercial documents in the HTS US. We'll show you examples of that in just one moment. Customs duties. Tariffs, to go back to some of our earlier terminology, governed by U.S. Customs Regulations and Rulings. There's it again, that's CFR Title 19. Other issues that we as importers absolutely have to address long before we start importing are the rules and regulations around how goods are packed, how they're stamped and marked with things like country of origin as an important consideration. How about goods that have arrived in the United States but they haven't cleared customs? They haven't entered into the commerce of the United States. Those are in bond or merchandise in transit shipments. Big part of global supply chain, not just in the U.S., is the in transit or in bond movement of goods. All the rules on that are there. The use of customs warehouse and container stations where goods go to be inspected should they need an inspection. Country of origin rules, all found in Title 19. Why is country of origin so important? Because that will determine the duty rate that we're paying. How we as importers, what are the rules for working with customs brokers? What about customs bonds? We haven't talked about this. A bond is really CBP's assurance that regardless of what goes on between the buyer in the United States and the vendor overseas, that if there are customs duties due, the government's going to get their money. So if we import product, clear it through customs, and there's $10,000 in duty due, and we get the merchandise and we find out it's the wrong merchandise, customs doesn't care. They still want their money. So if we don't pay the customs duties, customs is going to cash in the bond. It's an insurance policy. It's going to cash in the bond and get those duties through the insurance company. How about a company that imports $500,000 worth of merchandise and the week that the goods clear customs, they go bankrupt and they can't pay the customs duties? Customs doesn't care. They're going to execute on that bond and collect their money. Country of origin marking, we talked about that a moment ago. Quotas on products. Some products, particularly textile goods, agricultural, and some steel products, can be imported, but only in certain quantities at certain times of year. That's a quota. So we can only import 150,000 kilos of raw sugar or 150,000 tons of raw sugar from Brazil into the United States. That's a quota. All the rules for that are there. And then, of course, respect for trademarks, trade names, and copyrights. All the rules are there as well. So let's get into the HTS-US, and we have some good examples that help to illustrate this point. Bullet number 1, the U.S., we use the harmonized system. We said this a bunch of times to classify both import and export. It's the same system. Imports, it's called the HTS-US. For exports, it's called Schedule B, as we saw. In both cases, the first 6 digits are consistent with the harmonized system. So again, I look at my desk here, pair of reading glasses. I can classify these reading glasses anywhere in the world in countries of upwards of 200 nations that are members of the WCO, the World Customs Organization, and the classification number up to 6 digits, it's going to be the same. Countries then have the option of adding digits for more clarity. Here in the US, we have 10. So we take the 6 from the HS, add our own 4, we're dealing with 10 numbers. But that HS, bullet point number 3, is the foundation of our harmonized tariff schedule of the United States, as you see the name here in our graphics. Now, tariffs are established by Congress. The HTS itself, HTS-US, is put together, we're on our second to the last bullet point, by the U.S. International Trade Commission. And you can actually download a free PDF version of the, well, it's not free, our tax dollars pay for that, but you can gain access to the HTS and classify your own products by clicking on our link here. That classification and interpretation of entries, is the entry correct as submitted, is left to CBP.